Have you ever felt someone else as pain so deeply that you forgot where their suffering ended and yours began? Imagine standing in a room full of people, suddenly drowning in anxiety, and realizing you have no idea if it is your emotion, or if you've somehow absorbed it from the stranger standing next to you. This isn't sensitivity. This isn't compassion. This is something far more dangerous. And Carl Jung spent decades warning people like you about the point of no return. There's a specific moment in every empath's life that changes everything. It's not traumatic. There's no alarm that sounds, no voice whispering, "Turn back now before you lose yourself." Completely. It happens so gradually, you don't even notice the shift. One day you're someone who feels deeply for others, and the next you're re-staring at your reflection, wondering who is looking back at you because the person you used to be has vanished entirely. You started out innocent enough. You felt other people's emotions with unusual intensity. When your friend was heartbroken, you didn't just sympathize. Your chest physically ached, as if you'd been the one rejected. When your mother was anxious, your nervous system lit up like you were the one facing danger. This automatic response probably began in childhood. Maybe when your survival depended on reading the emotional temperature of unstable adults around you. But at this stage, you still knew the difference. You could still say, "This is their pain, not mine," even when it felt overwhelming. Then something shifted. Maybe someone you loved was suffering, and you couldn't bear to just witness it anymore. Maybe you entered a career where you were exposed to trauma daily counseling, nursing, social work. Or perhaps you decided your entire purpose on this planet was to heal others, to be the person who could hold what others couldn't tolerate. You stopped simply feeling and started actively taking on their darkness. You began believing that if you could just absorb enough of their suffering, somehow they'd feel lighter. You became a container for everyone's pain, and you wore this capacity like a badge of honor. But here, that's what you did and realized you were doing. You were engaging in what Jung called participation mystique, a psychological fusion where the boundaries between you and others dissolve completely. You weren't maintaining healthy empathy anymore. You were creating something Jung described as partial identity. A piece of you merged with them. A fragment of their psyche took up permanent residence in yours. And if you did this with multiple people over months or years, you transformed into something terrifying, a psychological composite, a collection of partial identities with no solid core self remaining. Carl Jung broke from Sigmund Freud in 1913, partly because he recognized something Freud missed. Humans are far more permeable to each other than we want to believe. We're not sealed psychological units. We're open systems constantly exchanging psychic material with everyone around us. Between 1913 and 1917, Jung deliberately opened himself to what he called the collective unconscious, and he nearly lost his sanity in the process. He documented this descent in what became known as the Red Book, keeping it private for most of his life because he understood how dangerous this knowledge was. What Jung discovered in that terrifying period was this: there is a specific psychological catastrophe that occurs when someone crosses what we might call the empathic event horizon, the point beyond which you cannot return to autonomous selfhood. He called it psychic infection, identification, possession by archetypes. But regardless of the terminology, he was describing the same devastating process, the complete dissolution of ego boundaries that leads to losing your individual identity and becoming a vessel for other people's unconscious material. Think about that therapist, Sarah, the one who wanted to help people heal from trauma. She had weak boundaries from childhood, where she'd been responsible for regulating her mother's emotions. When clients shared traumatic experiences, Sarah didn't just witness their pain, she absorbed it completely. She had nightmares about experiences that never happened to her. She thought about her clients constantly, texted them between sessions, extended appointment times, made exception after exception. She told herself this was dedication, real compassion. But what was actually happening? She was disappearing. Over time, she couldn't remember what she enjoyed before becoming a therapist. She had no hobbies separate from her work. When people asked about her life, she realized with creeping horror that she didn't have one. Her life had become other people's lives. Her emotions were other people's emotions. She'd developed what Jung would recognize as secondary personalities, internal voices that sounded like her various clients, each one demanding attention and care. She was exhausted in a way that rest couldn't fix, because this wasn't physical tiredness. This was existential depletion from living without a self. The most terrifying part? Sarah didn't fully recognize what had happened, because the dissolution occurred so gradually, and because our culture celebrates this kind of self-sacrifice as virtue, especially in women, especially in helping professions. She'd crossed the line Jung warned about, becoming what he called a wounded healer in the most dangerous sense, someone so identified with the healer archetype that her individual humanity had been sacrificed to it. Here's what makes this particularly insidious. When you identify with the healer archetype, when you begin believing you are the one who can save others, the person whose cosmic purpose is absorbing and transforming darkness, you've committed what Jung calls inflation. You've inflated your ego by merging it with an archetypal energy far larger than any individual can contain. You start believing you're capable of carrying and transforming others. Darkness, because you've lost the healthy boundary that would tell you this is impossible. This is beyond your capacity as a mortal human being. And once you cross that line, once you've dissolved into others, something even darker begins. Jung discovered that this process doesn't stop at simple exhaustion or compassion fatigue. What happens next is what he called psychic infection. You literally become infected by other people as unconscious complexes. In any deep empathic relationship, unconscious material transfers between people like a virus. The person projects their unconscious content onto you, and if you're not careful, you unconsciously absorb this content and begin acting it out without even realizing it. Jung wrote about this with chilling precision. The doctor, by voluntarily and consciously taking over the psychic sufferings of the patient, exposes himself to the overpowering contents of the unconscious, and hence also to their inductive action. The case begins to fascinate him. Here lies the danger of psychic infection. Fascination, that's the critical word. When you can't stop thinking about someone, when their problems consume your mental space, even during moments meant for rest, when you feel compelled to help them even at devastating cost to yourself, you're not being admirably compassionate. You're infected. Their unconscious complexes have colonized your psyche and are now controlling your behavior without your awareness. For those of you reading this who haven't crossed the line yet, this might sound exaggerated or melodramatic, but for those who have crossed it, you know exactly what I'm describing. You know the feeling of being unable to separate your emotions from someone else's. You walk into a room and suddenly feel depressed, and you have no idea if something in your actual life is wrong, or if you've absorbed someone else's state. You finish a phone call feeling anxious, and you can't figure out if the anxiety is yours, or if it is transferred from the other person. This confusion isn't occasional, it's constant. You are perpetually uncertain about which feelings belong to you, because the boundary that would provide that information has completely dissolved. So where exactly is this dangerous line? What specific point separates healthy empathy from catastrophic dissolution? Jung provides several unmistakable markers. First, the line is crossed when you can no longer distinguish your emotions from others' emotions. Healthy empathy means feeling with someone while knowing the feeling isn't yours recognizing. They sad, and I am feeling their sadness empathically, versus I am sad. When that distinction vanishes, when you're swimming in emotions with no idea of their origin, you've crossed over. Second, the line is crossed when your entire sense of identity and purpose becomes defined by your role in others' lives. Jung warned about identifying with the persona, the social mask we wear, rather than maintaining connection to the authentic self. For empaths, This persona is usually the helper, the healer, the one who understands when you can't answer, "Who am I?" without referencing how you help others. When you've sacrificed individual selfhood for a role, that role is now consuming you. Third, and most disturbing, the line is crossed when you develop what might be called psychological vampirism. This is when you unconsciously need others to remain broken, because their brokenness gives you purpose. You tell yourself you want them to heal, but unconsciously you're invested in their suffering, because without their need for you, you'd face the terrifying void of not knowing who you are. You might even subtly sabotage their healing or create dynamics of dependency. This isn't conscious malevolence. It's the inevitable result of having no self outside the healer role. Fourth, the line is crossed when you lose what Jung called the transcendent function, the psychological capacity to hold paradox and integrate opposites. In healthy functioning, you can simultaneously care about someone and maintain boundaries with them. You can feel empathy for suffering while recognizing it's not your responsibility to fix it. But when you've crossed the line, everything becomes black and white. Either you're helping or you're abandoning. Either you're empathic or you're selfish. Either you're absorbing their pain or you don't care at all. So what do you do if you recognize yourself in these markers? How do you recover autonomous selfhood once it's been dissolved? Jung's answer is both elegant and terrifyingly difficult. You must undergo what he called individuation, the process of differentiating yourself from the collective, from others, from archetypal identifications, and discovering your authentic self. Practically, this means radically reducing your empathic engagement with others. This will feel like becoming cold and selfish. It will feel like betraying your nature and abandoning your purpose. But it's actually the only way to recover boundary and selfhood. You must stop absorbing others' emotions. When someone shares pain, practice witnessing it without taking it in. Practice the phrase, "That's their experience," rather than letting it become your experience. This isn't about becoming unfeeling. It's about maintaining the distinction between self and other that healthy empathy requires. Jung understood that genuine help requires the helper to remain autonomous. A therapist who merges with a client's psychosis becomes psychotic and can no longer help. An empath who merges with others' suffering becomes equally wounded and loses all capacity for true assistance. You must also confront the terrifying question Jung posed to all his patients. Who are you when you're not helping anyone? Who are you in silence, in solitude, when no one needs you? If that question fills you with existential dread, if you feel empty or purposeless when you're not actively engaged in someone else's crisis, you've already crossed the line. The work of individuation means sitting in that emptiness until you discover or rediscover a self that exists, independent of others' needs. Jung would tell you that this isn't about becoming a hermit or losing your capacity for connection. It's about establishing what he called proper relationship with both yourself and others, a relationship based on two autonomous individuals choosing connection rather than two fragmented beings fusing together to avoid the terror of their own incompleteness. The line you must never cross is the line between empathy and dissolution, between caring and merging, between helping and disappearing. And if you've already crossed it, the only way back is through the painful work of reconstructing boundaries and rediscovering who you actually are, beneath all the partial identities you've absorbed.